Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate Earth Day in the Pine Barrens of southeastern Massachusetts. Today's topic is Our Water, Indigenous Perspectives, Youth Voices, and Activism. The webinar is hosted by the Community Land and Water Coalition. We're a network of groups and individuals seeking to preserve, protect, and steward our unique and finite land and water. They are all irreplaceable and we're losing them fast. The Community Land and Water Coalition is an action-oriented group. We're always looking for more members. Tonight's webinar logistics, we are live streaming on Facebook and our Facebook page at Land and Water Plymouth. I can't see the rest of that. We are also recording, so we will send out the recording afterwards to folks that have registered for it. We're going to save all our question and answers until after our speakers have gone. And if you're having technical trouble, especially the speakers, the way to get a hold of us is the 207-251-3187. Tonight's speakers, Indigenous Perspectives, Youth Voices, and Activists. We have Melissa Harding Ferretti, who's a Herring Pond Wampanoag. We have Britteny Walley, who's a Nipmuc Tribe educator and youth activist. Casey Thornburgh, Mashpee Wampanoag Climate and Native Communities. David Boutt, who's at UMass Amherst, who is does hydrology and hydrogeology of the aquifer, and Warren Winders, who's with Trout Unlimited, who's going to speak about saving Red Brook in Plymouth and Wareham. We have a great diverse crowd. Melissa is going to be our first speaker, and she is going to start by playing a recording from the new award-winning book, We Are Water Protectors, which is a bold and lyrical picture book written by Carol Lindstrom from the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe. And it's illustrated by Michaela Goad, who's a Tlingit and Haida tribes. She just won the 2021 Caldecott Medal for her illustrations, the first Native American to win this award. The book was inspired by the many Indigenous-led movements across North America. We the Water Protectors issues an urgent rallying cry to safeguard the Earth's water from harm and corruption. The book tells the story of an Ojibwe girl who fights against the Dakota Access Pipeline. Water is the first medicine. It affects and connects us all. The book also won a Children's Book Award for younger children and the Golden Kite Award for picture books. So let's start with Melissa's reading.
Waniwanok Natasuis, Melissa Ferretti, Nutomas Ikwana Makwapakwet, Kanatai Patuxet at Borndalet. Good evening. My name is Melissa Ferretti. I am from the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe of Plymouth and Borndale. So I'm going to share my screen, and thank you to the Community Land and Water Coalition. And I'd like to thank my brilliant panelists in advance because I'm sure we're going to have a really excellent session. So let me share my screen with you. Just give me a brief second. Here we go. Hold on. Sorry. I will do full screen. I'm going to hit play, and here we go.
Good evening. Melissa Ferretti, Herring Pond Wampanoag Chairwoman. Tonight, we are going to be reading We Are Water Protectors, written by Carol Lindstrom, illustrated by Michaela Goad. Water is the first medicine, Nokomos told me. We come from water. It is nourished inside our mother's body as it nourishes us here on Mother Earth. Water is sacred, she said. We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here. The river's rhythm runs through my veins, runs through my people's veins. My people talk of a black snake that will destroy the land, spoil the water, poison plants and animals, wreck everything in its path. When my people first spoke of the black snake, they foretold that it wouldn't come for many, many years. Now the black snake is here. Its venom burns the land, courses through the water, making it unfit to drink. Take courage. I must keep the black snake away from my village's water. I must rally my people together to stand for the water, to stand for the land, to stand as one against the black snake. We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here. It will not be easy. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, the winged ones, the crawling ones, the four-legged, the two-legged, the plants, trees, rivers, lakes, the earth. We are all related. Tears like waterfalls stream down, tracks down my face, tracks down my people's faces. Water has its own spirit. No, water is alive. Water remembers our ancestors who came before us. We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here. We are stewards of the earth. Our spirits have not been broken. We are water protectors. We stand. Black snake is in for the fight of its life.
So thank you. So the theme of Earth Day is Restore Our Earth, which 51st, it's the 51st anniversary, and they say planting seeds for a greener future. And as we think about planting seeds for a greener future, Indigenous people have remained on the front lines of these efforts to prevent the assaults on our Mother Nature, our Mother Earth. And we feel that we have a responsibility to protect it. As a proud people who have adapted over hundreds of years, and as a tribe at the center of colonization, our history as Indigenous people of this region is deeply ingrained and rooted and connected to the land and the water upon which our ancestors depended. Our traditional practices consisted of caring for the land and all that is sacred, including water, herring, fish, Pine Barrens, and all other sacred plants and animals of this region. So we're here today on Earth Day to pay tribute to our water and homage to our beloved and ancient Pine Barrens and to the land, our Mother Earth, like ours, nourishes their deep roots. Spring is upon us, I think. After today, I'm not so sure. But for Wampanoag people, spring in itself, it symbolizes in the return of the spring fish, herring, alewife, sequan in Wampanoag language. It symbolizes new beginnings. And it surely brought a new life to my household as a young Wampanoag child growing up raised by an elder. Being raised by Verna, it was certainly a pivotal moment in our yearly planning but that's another story I can share another day. But the great news is the herring are here and our runs are filling up. And the Herring Pond watershed, even yesterday, took some count and actually counted a little over 250, finally heading in through to the Great Herring Pond. I participated in the herring count last week, and standing there on Little Sandy Pond Road brought back a lot of memories, because I grew up in Cedarville. And to stand there at the flume and, you know, be watching for the herring, it was surely different than some of the things that we did as young children. Our burial ground is about 1 minute, not even 30 seconds up the hill from the spring where I stood that day to count. And I thought, this is great. Let's participate. Why would I not want to participate and be at one with the herring and stand on our reservation lands to participate and try to come up with a number? It did a lot of thinking that day, and I thought, gee, you know, I'm sure our Wampanoag people in the you know, hundreds of years ago, there must have been some sort of account. I would imagine the numbers were surely of our concern. And when you see those herring, it was surely new beginnings. I'm sure we would watch for them. So I just wanted to share that about the herring. Thank you for listening to my read along, and I am going to pass it on to Britteny Walley.
Cha, Notasawis, Britteny Piawe Wampanoag Walley. Hi, my name is Britteny Walley, and I am very honored and very excited to chat with everyone today. So I wanted to first kind of give just some background information. I actually used to work in Plymouth. I used to work at the Museum Plymouth and Historic Patuxent. So I've been around your waterways and have had to do a lot of deep learning about them, and then share that knowledge with people all over the globe when that was appropriate to do so before times changed. And I wanted to talk about that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I wanted to first explain what Nipmuc means. What is Nipmuc? Nipmuc means freshwater people. So it's very exciting to be able to chat with you folks today, because it is in the name. You know, what's in the name? Nipmuc, freshwater people that lived in an area called Nipnet. And that's not Plymouth. That's more like the center of Massachusetts and the tippity tops of Connecticut and Rhode Island that touch it. So Nipnet. So this Nipmuc people lived in Nipnet, and many still do, I do. But what does it mean? So Nipmuc, nippy, it means water. So freshwater people is really what it translates to. And where did these people live? They lived in Nipnet, which is a freshwater place. It's all in the language. The language is very specific. Nipmuc is an Algonquin language, of course. And so when you look at the language, you can learn a lot. So freshwater people from a freshwater place. And to help give you more you know, context for a map, you might think of Worcester being the center of this area. And Webster. In Webster, we have this one lake. You might have heard it called Webster Lake, but it is also Lake Chabanagagmag. And then it has a very, very long name. It's actually the place in the whole globe. It has the third longest place name. And unfortunately, I struggle with it, although my dad could say it in his sleep. So what's in a name? Well, you know, a long time ago, someone, actually a publisher, a writer rather, wrote an article and said, well, the lake is named, you fish on your side, I'll fish on my side, and nobody fishes in the middle. And that's what it means in Nipmuc. It's not. It's not what it means. If you look at what it means, it may mean one or two different things, but it is understood as a mutual fishing ground place. And if you look at a bird's eye view, you can see all these peninsulas that jut out. It's actually quite a large lake. I visited over the winter time. It was all frozen over. People were ice fishing, and you can go, you know, snowmobiling on this lake. It's pretty big. If you look at it, it has all these peninsulas and islands, and if you really break down the language, there is a theory that it means, you know, a lake divided by peninsulas and islands, so go figure. And I bring that lake up because that is a place where my ancestors have been going for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So to have a relationship and a connection with a special place like that, and to be able to just talk about it with folks, is a very special thing, especially, you know, it's Earth Day. So we're thinking about the earth and the waters, of course. And I really wanted to drive home that relationship that we have with the water as far as a Nipmuc person goes. I've been connected through many things. My dad was an avid fisherman, a veteran, and in the end, he was also a park ranger looking over the Blackstone River and making sure that it didn't flood the area around it. So we've been connected to the waters in many different ways. But aside from these abstract, you know, responsibilities in our life, we come from the water. We don't emerge as if we're walking out of it like some, you know, picture of evolution here, but where else did we come from? We didn't come out of a machine. You know, we come from the earth, and the water and the earth are one. And if you look really far away, I suppose we're all part of the same thing. That connection with the land sometimes is lost in modern day. And I really wanted to drive that home because we are all interconnected in that way. And waterways are interconnected. And that's something that I wanted to bring up when I was in Plymouth. And the museum that I worked at is right on the edge of the Eel River. And I know we're talking about fish that are, you know, running right now. And a fascinating species is the eel, right? And so the Eel River is where the museum is located on. So right there, right in Plymouth, you have all kinds of waters. You have the freshwater springs that were sources of water, drinking water, and you have freshwater rivers that become brackish, so then they're half salt and half not. And it goes, you can see the connection, it goes right out into the ocean. Right, and if you watch the path of the eels, you see how all the waterways are really interconnected, or I like to say interwoven, because I like to weave. So the things are interwoven, right? And if you follow that path of the eel and you see how the waterways are interconnected, it really drives home just how interconnected we all are. Well, to bring this up, a relation that we should have with the water when we're thinking about how do we protect it? Why do we protect it? Well, for someone like myself, I think about 7 generations. And that's really an abstract thought. 7 is a great number, but it can extend further than that because the next person is thinking about the next 7 generations, so on and so forth. But I think about not just myself, not just the next generation, but the next 7. And then I do a little 180 and I look behind myself metaphorically. I think about the past generations because I am where I am because of the work of those past 7 generations. I do a lot of work outside of things related to the water, but still related to Native issues. And I'm only where I am because people have been fighting for my entire lifetime. And then I can pop up and continue that fight, right? So I think about these generations forward and back, and I didn't really, when I was asked to speak, this hadn't happened yet, but I wanted to take a moment just to observe that very recently, the matriarch of the Dakota Access Pipeline movements, in Standing Rock, a citizen of Standing Rock, LaDonna Brave Bull Allard, actually passed on. She's matriarch of this movement that this book we're talking about is based off of. That's a big deal. And I wanted to take a moment to think about that, right? Because it really underscores how the next generation has truly inherited the rest of that fight. She may be around, but not in the same way she was, and it's an honor and a privilege to continue making positive change, especially when you have people like that. And so that's me looking backwards, right? And then looking forwards in a way, well, what's going on? And there's all kinds of land preservation movements. There are some local to me, whether it might be preserving wetlands. There's lots and lots of wetlands where I live, and people are consistently trying to develop them. And you have to think about not just what it develops for the next generation, but think about the impact of that space in relation to everything else, right? Well, I can think about things local to me, and I can think about some issues that are further away. I'm learning, okay, maybe in the Cape, there's a land development issue going on right now. And why is it so important? Because it's about not just the water, it's not just about the soil, but the nutrients in the soil and the wildlife and the energy that is in those spaces. And I'm not just talking about a metaphorical energy. I mean, there's energy that's being really generated there. These are really important spaces to keep healthy for the next 7 generations, you know? We only have one Earth, last I checked. So what can you do? What can you do? Well, I'm looking out in the crowd and I can see a range of all different folks. So I figured I would share what I've done in a way. And when I was working at that museum in Plymouth, I think the best part about it was that people would come in and, you know, some people come and go, but some people, you sit down and you have this transformative moment with them. So I think if you are aware of your native local leadership, your communities, the tribes, if you aren't, that's the first place to start. Make sure you have a connection and build it. And then also look towards, you know, who are your state representatives? Can you make a connection with people who can help you make change? Are there others that are like-minded like you? And when you're moving forward in those ways, the communication is important in itself. But I have found that human interaction, that personal connection, that's the most powerful point for a transformative moment. And I think when we kind of tune into how we all need to care for one another, we truly do it. It sounds nice, but I really mean it. We're all interconnected into the same basket, right? And when that fires off in our head, I think that's when we make a lot of positive change.
Thank you, Brittany. Our next speaker is Casey Thornburgh. He's a member of the Wampanoag Tribe and a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe, and earned his PhD in geography at the University of Arizona with an emphasis on climate education and Native communities. He's a tribal liaison with the United South and Eastern Tribe Office of Environmental Resource Management. Casey works out of the New England CAFC in Amherst, Massachusetts, where he also resides.
Thank you. Winiwanak, Nataswis Casey Thornburgh on Thomas Mississippi, Nukas Osuisu, Cheryl Green, Kanusus Osuisu, Curtis Thornbrew. Good evening, everyone, or good late afternoon. The daylight hours are getting longer, right? Just introducing myself and my family. My mother's from Mashpee, Cheryl Green, and my father, where my last name comes from, Thornbrew. His family lives in Oklahoma and the Kansas area. And, you know, I've been doing research on Thornbrew. I know it comes from the English Isles, and continuing to search for the origin of that name in our family there. Being a Mashpee Wampanoag and living in Mashpee, I know origin, you know, right there in Mashpee. Also interested in my father's family as well. As stated, citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe and work as a tribal climate science liaison for a intertribal nonprofit called United South and Eastern Tribes. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen here to share some slides and just kind of hit my phone here so I can do my best to stay with time. I might go through these kind of fast to do that, but you go ahead and share screen. Okay. And there we go. Everyone should hopefully see that okay. Slideshow. Okay, cool. Everyone can see that okay? Thumbs up. All right. One of the things about my kind of background and growing up is I was born in Massachusetts, but lived away most of my life. My mother, Cheryl, worked for different organizations, and one in particular she worked with the National Indian Youth Leadership Project, which is based in New Mexico. So when I was small, when I was a kid, we actually moved out to New Mexico, and I lived there all the way from middle school, high school, and eventually went to college at the University of New Mexico. So the mascot there is the Lobos, the Spanish for wolf. And during that time, even though I grew up away from home, I had the chance, through my mother's work to be a part of and, be in different tribal nations and Native communities. And, I think that's what got me interested in geography, because with tribal nations and landscapes, there are hundreds of different languages, hundreds of places and worldviews. And, it gets a sense of how profoundly diverse Indian country is, and how many nations are represented. So I think I got interested in like maps and places, and that's probably why I went into geography. I had the chance to just travel to many places. I had been in the Southwest long enough that I really got used to it. One of the things I enjoyed about being at the University of New Mexico was how many Native students there were, as part of the student population. Native American Student Services was a pretty big center. There were many Native student events on campus, many Native student organizations. Even though, like, I guess Native students would still be a minority, when you have a college campus where there's, 1,500 Native students, a lot happens. It's a pretty big community. So I really enjoyed that. And I chose to go to grad school at the University of Arizona, right next door, kind of for similar reasons. They had a lot of Native student support, and a Native Student Services Center. And it was interesting because I was looking at other graduate schools that didn't really have that. And, it was a community I wanted to continue to be a part of through graduate school. And so I ended up going to the University of Arizona and studying climate under the geography department. And one of my other passions was teaching, and I also wanted to have the opportunity to teach in Native communities. So while doing my graduate work, I had the choice. I could be a teaching assistant at the University of Arizona, but I chose to seek an opportunity to teach at a tribal college. I taught weather and climate and geography classes at Donna Autumn Community College, which is in southern Arizona. Donna Autumn means desert people, and it's just really interesting with our many tribal nations. Our languages, as we're hearing on this call, it often just reflects on where we're from. Mashpee is that body of fresh water, Mashpee Wampanoag Pond on Cape Cod, and we're the people of that place. Donna Autumn are the people of that place where there's those giant saguaro cacti and it's a desert landscape. And so for thousands of years, that's, the identity and the sense of place. So I thought weather and climate at Donna Autumn Community College, but one of the things that I had thought of and experienced was I was teaching weather and climate out of a textbook. And I was like, you know what? All these words that we're using, climate, precipitation, types of clouds, cumulus, cirrus, stratus, those are from like Latin and Greek languages. And I'm like, those aren't our original languages. So I'm kind of thinking, what did we call these things? And I started working, the students I was working with, some were fluent in their language, but a lot weren't. Many tribal nations and Native communities, we have dealt with this historical trauma of like being in places of where kids are sent to boarding school and punished for speaking the language, and the parents have kids and their kids have kids, and you get into a situation where like grandparents lived through a situation where they were abused, faced abuse for speaking their language, and their kids are like trying to learn it and you're trying to like deal with those issues. So at the college, I sought out some elders from the community and I was like, hey, can we start teaching this weather and climate but using the Altham language? And I'm not a speaker, so it wouldn't be my place to do so. But like, if I could have, people in the community come and speak. And so we started to talk about things like the water cycle, the different seasons, but in Altham language first. So we get grounded in that. And then we still talk about the Latin, Greek, and all the other terms to add on to that. But, just keeping the essence and the core of the college and, of students of that community first. So these are just kind of some pictures. We went on a lot of field trips. We did a lot of outdoor learning. I said, the weather and climate, you got to be outside. That's how you learn it and everything. This last symbol here on the bottom is the American Science and Engineering Society. That's one of the student organizations that really helped me through graduate school. Other Native students learning, getting degrees in science and math related fields. So after I got my PhD, it was time to come home. I just felt that pull. I had been in the Southwest my whole life. And I'd come back to Mashpee to like see family or to volunteer with like youth programs and things like that. And I came back to work with my tribe for a few years in the Natural Resources Department. So it's quite a shift going from desert to green, which was home, but a wonderful experience because for the first time in my life, I was around people I was related to. And, that was kind of like, really special. I'm going to be cruising along here pretty quick to stay in time. So just talk real briefly about my job here. So after working for my tribe, I had the opportunity to work for intertribal nonprofit using my education in climate. And, that was something that I really wanted to do. And so I was part of this program funded by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to employ tribal liaisons across the country. And tribal liaisons would work in different regions with a tribal organization of that region. So today there's 8 of us, and we work as tribal liaisons across different parts of the country, working to get climate information and resources and technical support to tribal nations that are dealing with climate change in some way or form. The organization that employs me is United South and Eastern Tribes, also known as USET. USET started in 1969 with 4 founding tribal nations, the Seminole Tribe of Florida, Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. And the idea was, to really get the trust and treaty responsibilities fulfilled from the federal government to tribal nations. It can be challenging going one-on-one, your tribal nation with the United States, to basically say, hey, the United States has got the land from sea to shining sea, so to speak. But in exchange for that, there's this trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations for funding of services and programs, protecting remaining tribal lands and resources and whatnot. And so USET formed as a united group of tribal nations to work together and to ensure that those trust and treaty responsibilities of the United States to tribal nations is fulfilled, to advocate on behalf of tribal nations, and to provide technical support to tribal nations. And so that's kind of what I do in the climate change space. So all of us at USET, we work for tribal nations and tribal nation governments. So in my role, I work closely with the Northeast and the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Centers to get information that the Climate Adaptation Science Centers are finding through their research and work about climate change to the tribal nations that could use that information to develop like a climate adaptation plan. So that's where the liaising comes back. I kind of go back and forth working with researchers and staff at the climate adaptation science centers with tribal nation departments like the environmental departments or natural resources departments or cultural resource departments that need the information to work and plan, and dealing with climate change. So I'll wrap up here pretty quickly, but we have, the climate's changing. Over the past 100 years, especially the northern tier of the US and areas out west have seen significantly warmer temperatures. You could just speak with elders in the community, and certainly we talk, you hear about it in Mashpee where, the lakes don't freeze over as they used to. I mean, occasionally they do, but you hear from elders and you hear from other folks that, the season for which things froze over was much longer. People were driving out on lakes at a time and doing a lot more ice fishing and things like that. And so we don't see that as much. We see it a little bit, but things are changing. Also with species that are, our relatives that we use to sustain us, as the land is warming, so is the ocean. So this is a chart showing biomass of 3 particular species: Atlantic cod, American lobster, and black sea bass. You can see in the 70s, this is my geography right here. The latitude is perfectly lined up here, 40 degrees latitude hitting New Jersey, 42 hitting Cape Cod and whatnot. But the biomass of lobsters kind of moving north over the past several decades. So is the biomass of black sea bass. So they're following as the water's getting warmer. Lobsters looking for cooler water. Black sea bass is following the warmer water up north. Sea level rise. Most places on the Atlantic have seen at least between 8 and 12 inches of sea level rise since 1900s. Places in Louisiana where they have more subsidence are seeing like 2 to 3 feet of sea level rise. And we're going to be dealing with that into this century here. Some tribal nations are right on the water. And if your reservation or your trust lands are right on the water and you're surrounded by private property or other towns, where do you go? How do you deal with that and move? And tribal nations are having to plan for this. So our department is growing. Right now, we're a program of 2. Always looking to find additional, funds. Grant, we're nonprofits, so we're very much grant funded for positions and programs. So I'm hoping to build this climate change resilience program so we can more adequately provide technical support to tribal nations. These are just some site visits that we go on. For example, we went to the Seminole Tribe of Florida. They gave us a tour of their communities and reservations and areas that they are particularly concerned about: sea level rise or invasive species moving into very important habitat. We shared climate change projections with the Seneca Nation, showing kind of the range and where rainfall can happen over the next 50 to 100 years. We focus on species of cultural importance, which tribal nations, we all have. We also try to come together for workshops and presentations on what do we do about this? What do tribal nations collectively do? This one's about the emerald ash borer, which is really it's an invasive species impacting ash trees, which are culturally significant for the Wampanoag nations over Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia area. We have a website that we try to post the most up-to-date climate information for tribal nations, which has been especially important during COVID because we haven't been able to do site visits or we haven't been able to have conferences. So we try to use the virtual world to get people the information they need. Katap Tanmu, thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you very much, Casey. Our next speaker is David Boutt, who's the professor of geosciences at the School of Earth and Sustainability at UMass Amherst. He'll be speaking on hydrology and hydrogeology of the Plymouth Carver Aquifer system, the source of waters, ponds, wetlands, and drinking wells.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Melissa and Brittany and Casey. Actually, Casey and I are in the same building, and often walk by Casey's office down in the Climate Center downstairs. And one of the other kind of random facts is that I actually moved here from New Mexico as well, from Socorro, New Mexico. And today I'm talking to you from Nipmuc and Pocumtuck lands here in the Connecticut River Valley, kind of right on the edge of the Connecticut River here in Sunderland. And what I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about, and thank you, Meg, for the invitation, is just to talk a little bit about what we know about the Plymouth Carver aquifer system, which is a really important water aquifer system that's really connected and connects the landscape that that Plymouth and the region sits on. And let me just get into these slides here. You can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So one of the things that shapes the landscapes is the most recent extent of glaciers that covered the landscape. And one of the really interesting things, you know, when you think about a lot of what we know about 20,000 years ago to the present really is informed by the movement of native peoples and the materials and the relics that were left behind that allowed scientists to understand the deglaciation. So at about 20,000 years ago, the edge of the Laurentide ice sheet sat offshore here in New England, and as it retreated north, it left a series of sediment deposits in different types of deposits, being, let's say, if you're out in the area that's now underwater in Cape Cod Bay here, there actually are lake deposits, not marine deposits, but actually freshwater lake deposits that would have been from a melting glacier. And as the glacier line moved north, that left a series of deposits that the landscape at which we now know that I had in that picture at the beginning is what's reflected. And so if we look at the current, or at least the position of the ice margin, which is primarily reflected by the deposits that were left and have been reworked by, or at least modified by oceanographic currents in the ocean, you can see as the glacier moved to the north here, different periods of time left different glacial deposits. And these glacial deposits actually are what are that hold the fresh water and transmit that fresh water to the ponds, to the rivers, to ultimately to the ocean across this landscape. And one of the things as hydrologists that and hydrogeologists that we'd like to communicate, and I think one thing that most likely the native peoples and indigenous peoples of these regions really understood is that the land is interconnected, and that when we see surface water in the form of ponds or streams, it's really telling us about this sort of underground expanse of fresh water. And in the particular case of the Plymouth Carver aquifer, it has very unique characteristics that also it makes it unique and prolific in some ways, and also makes it quite vulnerable to different activities and different, let's say, contamination sources from the land surface. And the primary reason for that is as we have precipitation, and some of these terms that Casey was just referring to as water falls out of the sky in the form of precipitation, some of that water actually makes it into the ground. We call that infiltration. And a big chunk of that actually goes back into the atmosphere. And the water that becomes quote unquote groundwater, that water can move under gravity down towards lower lying areas. And as I'll show you in a minute, in the case of the Plymouth Carver Aquifer, there's actually a quite what we would call in hydrogeology transmissive. It's very easy to move water through the sands and gravel deposits that form the landscape. And what that means is that if there's let's say a drinking water well or a well that supplies water to a community, there's a strong connectivity between, let's say, a nearby stream or nearby pond to that water. And so when we start to pull water from the ground, we also have to think about what the ramifications and the impacts of that are on the connected landscape, the connected water landscape. So this map that I'm showing you here is a map of the geologic deposits across Massachusetts. And one of the things I just want to point out to you, all the orange colors here are very what we would call coarse-grained or the sands and gravel deposits, the deposits that were worked by water, that were deposited in flowing streams and areas where you had lots of flowing water that washed away the finer grain materials. And one of the things that you can see on this map is this part of Southeast Massachusetts that I'll talk a little bit more about, which we call the Plymouth Carver Aquifer, or sometimes people lump in the Plymouth Carver Kingston Duxbury Aquifer system here to the north. It's a very coherent, there's a large amount of these deposits in this region that makes it one of the most prolific aquifer systems that we have in the northeastern part of the United States. This aquifer system really would rival other aquifer systems outside of the region. And just to step back, if you're not familiar with the term aquifer, an aquifer is essentially a water-bearing subsurface deposit that can transmit water at rates that are economically feasible. So one of the things that makes the Plymouth Carver Aquifer system unique in this part of the region is that in the interior part of Massachusetts, the water table, the depth to which you would hit water is actually very close to the land surface. In the Plymouth Carver Aquifer system, the depth to water, notated here by this kind of blue line here versus this red line, is actually much deeper. And what that means is that as water comes into the system or comes into the ground through precipitation, it actually can move easily across the landscape. And that has really important implications for how the water resources are managed and understood. And in fact, that's the primary reason that the federal government and the Environmental Protection Agency gave a sole source aquifer determination for the aquifer system. It's that important. So one of the things I just want to communicate to you all is that the permeable, I mean like ease at which the water can move through the ground, it allows rapid infiltration and broad connectivity across the landscape. It also means that the amount of time it takes for the water to move out of the sky and move to some other location can be quite long. And so these systems are quite drought resistant. But they're also vulnerable to overuse and contamination from the land surface because of some of those properties. So here's just a conceptualization. What you're looking at here is kind of a slice through the earth. This would be the land surface here. This would be the water table. And a lot of the ponds that we have in the Plymouth region are actually essentially expressions of the water table. Their water's kind of moving through, it comes into the ponds and it moves out the other side. It's quite a fantastic and interesting region from a hydrology and hydrogeology perspective. So I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time, but what I want to show you is like as a hydrologist and hydrogeologist, how we kind of view these systems. I just want to point you to this schematic here. This would be the land surface here. And let's say we have a pumping well. This would be a well that's withdrawing water from the aquifer. What we do is we actually can map out where the water came from that's coming out of the well using different types of tools. And we can, in plan view, we can actually map out that region. So if this is our pumping well, the area of the land where the water fell that's contributing to the pumping well would come from an area of, let's say, of this ellipse. All right. So I'm going to show you now next is a pretty colorful map that needs a little bit of explanation. So what this map shows you for the Plymouth Carver aquifer system is onto the landscape, each color represents an area that's contributing to different features and different locations on the landscape. So the green areas are showing you where on the land, if water fell, would contribute to a pond. In yellow, and it's a little bit hard to see, that drains to the bay or the ocean or Buzzards Bay or Cape Cod Bay via a stream or a surface. The orange is areas where if water fell on this part of the landscape, it would go right out to the ocean directly. And in blue, this is the water that would be captured by, let's say, a production well or a pumping well for one of the communities. So hydrologists use these tools, hydrogeologists use these tools to understand how the landscape is connected to one another, and as we make modifications to the landscape, what that might mean for the distribution of water and how water makes it to these different features. So I just wanted to introduce you all to a little bit of the things that we know about this important aquifer, and you know, I'll make sure to stay for a while after our discussion wraps up to answer any questions you all might have. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was great. Our last speaker is Warren Winders, who's with Trout Unlimited. He's going to speak to us about activism and saving our rivers and how communities can restore nature and water.
Okay, I'm going to do a screen share here. I think I'm going to do a screen share. Okay. I don't suppose you can see this, huh? Okay, I've got it. I think I've got it.
Someone may have to give it up.
Yeah, I know. Let me see. Let me try again. Okay. So.
Jeez.
Because what's the
It says the host has disabled screen sharing. Is that what it says for you, Warren?
no, it's not saying that. It's let me see.
No, you should be a co-host.
Yeah.
Are you at screen share at the bottom?
Okay. Let me see if I can find that.
Green button at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. No, I don't have that right now. Let me see. I'll go back.
If you move your cursor over it, it will appear. It hides otherwise.
Let me see. This is gonna happen. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Okay. Well, I'm sorry about this, folks. This isn't the setup that I usually have.
You see some choices at the bottom of your screen that say participants chat.
No, you know, it doesn't show. All I've got here is the. Let me shut this off again and go back to.
You've got to hover your mouse over the bottom part of the screen to get the controls.
Yeah. Right now, I don't even have. I'm sorry. I know we're running out of time here. No. This is.
Can we take some questions while you are trying to pull?
Sure.
Why don't
Let
we?
me. Why don't I? I'm trying to. This is probably something I shouldn't have even gotten into. Okay.
You can also send it to Julian and he could share it.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to show you is just that the first slide was of. See, all I'm getting is I'm not getting the. The first slide, I'll just read this. I'm sorry about this. The word sacred isn't used loosely. If we want and need wild fisheries, herring, eels, trout, striped bass, if we want wild birds and mammals, if we as a species want to survive, we have to treat the water, streams, rivers, ponds, and the land that surrounds those waters with reverence. The UN recently came out with a paper that emphasized the need for our human societies to change our ways in order to survive. According to the UN, if we want to survive as a species, we need to make peace with nature. All of life is interconnected. The vital web of existence is shared by all. Trout Unlimited's mantra of protect, reconnect, restore pays homage to the reality of ecosystems and their life-sustaining webs. This is what Red Brook has taught us over 30 years of our immersion in the fight to ensure Red Brook's survival. And this is why we came out in force at the local, state, and national levels of Trout Unlimited to oppose the NODO's zoning proposal. The surrounding land and the water under it are essential to Red Brook and its fisheries. Red Brook is obviously a small, I'm going to have to alter some of my, Red Brook is obviously a small stream. At one time, it was part of our region's grand system of free-flowing rivers and streams that were connected to the ocean. Today, it survives as a fragile remnant of that grand system. Red Brook's future depends on the survival of the unique forest that surrounds it. Given what it teaches us, Red Brook is every bit as important as Bristol Bay is, which is the large area in Alaska that was recently saved from the Pebble Mine. The lands around Red Brook, the land that was preserved by by Red Brook are the land that is now the Red Brook Preserve are critical lands in that they help protect the aquifer that David was just talking about with and the notice proposal was a threat to that aquifer because it was sitting right on top of that flowing water that flows down and feeds the brook. Somewhere here I have a picture of a salted brook trout. It's salted brook trout are the trout of the Pine Barrens. They've been here for 10,000 years or more ever since the ice left. The salted brook trout is the fish that saved Red Brook, and Red Brook in turn saved salted brook trout. This is a brook trout that can move out into the marine environment, so it encompasses all of these connected ecosystems that we're just talking about. It can move out into the marine environment during the colder months to take advantage of the abundance of food in the bays and estuaries. As the water of those bays warm in the springtime, the trout will move back into the cool waters of their groundwater-fed streams. It was that groundwater the springs from that groundwater that has allowed brook trout to survive here for 10,000 years. Salinas fontanalis basically means the char of the spring. So, it's the groundwater that David was talking about is what has maintained these brook trout for so long. Part of what's happened, and I wish I had the slides to show you, is that almost all of the streams in the area that once supported brook trout, an abundance of brook trout, have no longer can do that because they've been dammed. They've been used for cranberry growing, and they no longer have the cold water necessary to support brook trout. So I guess Red Brook is important as a reminder of what once existed. It's also it also tells us about what can be done in the future. And at Red Brook, we over the last 20 years, with help from a lot of people, we managed to pull out 4 dams with the help of DER, NOAA, and we also, I'm trying to get these slides up, but I can't do it. The lost streams also reveal what biologist David Pauly calls a shifting baseline. As abundance declines over time, each generation creates a new definition of abundance until what is thought to be abundant by the most recent generation is but a small fraction of what once was. So that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at a remnant of what used to be. Today, Red Brook and a few other salted streams make up mere remnants of what once was. So how did Red Brook avoid the fate of its sister streams? The Lyman family essentially preserved the brook for 100 years, and after that, they handed stewardship off to a partnership that consists of the trustees of reservations, the Mass Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and Trout Unlimited. DER made Red Brook a priority project in 2006. Basically, what has happened with Red Brook is we've rewilded Red Brook. If we are to survive as a species, we need to treat our streams with reverence. Earth Day is a reminder that we need to give the natural world the reverence that it deserves. It is past time for us to make peace with nature. So I'm sorry about my messed up slideshow. But that's basically my message.
Awesome, Warren. Thank you.
Sorry.
And Warren, if we can send those to us, we can send them out with the recording
Okay, thank you.
so
Thank you.
that people can take advantage of them.
Yeah, I can send them. I'm inept when it comes to this type of technology. I'm sorry about that. I thought I had it down.
Okay, so we can either have folks put questions in the chat box, or under reactions at the bottom of your screen, you can raise your hand, whichever works better. And Julian also has put in the chat box the different take actions items that we have, so you can just copy and paste those if you'd like. But let's open to questions, and then we'll review some of our actions. Do we have anybody that has a question?
Yeah, I have Howard Randall. We are lugging off the filter material of the Carver Plymouth Aquifer. Every day the gravel trucks go by my home, I'm sure the homes of many others. And how do we ever provide analysis as to when enough is enough? Who does that? And why doesn't the Commonwealth consider this a critical resource and not allow what's going on?
Who would like to take that?
This is David Boutt. I can try to start with that one. I actually live in a town called Sunderland, Massachusetts. That's has the same thing going on. The drinking water that I have here is in an aquifer that's also a sand and gravel aquifer. It also supports a fishery and a hatchery. And these are things that are very challenging, I think, because of the different special interests that are at bay. To some extent, there are hydrogeological analyses that the sand and gravel companies must do to show the state that they're not having any impacts. But at the same time, I think some of those impacts, like if you start removing more sand and gravel, you're gonna increase or decrease the amount of time it could take a potential contaminant to make it into the subsurface. One of the examples around here is a lot of our sand and gravel pits have met their life expectancy because they can go within a couple meters or a couple feet of the water table, and they start processing asphalt and other things in those open spaces, which cause other potential opportunities for water to make it into the aquifer. So it's a great question. It's something on the minds of a lot of us. I think if you were to ask somebody at DEP or at the state agencies, they would say that the risks are small. But I think there needs to be some, I think, longer term view on the potential impacts of those activities. So that I'll just say that.
Thank you.
There is the Massachusetts EPA. If you, Julian, can you put that slide up? And it's also in our chat. Has a meeting on April 28th to get public comments. So the more people we can get calling into that meeting and making comments, we just have to have a lot of voices pushing back on them ignoring these critical issues. So that's coming up on the 28th, and there's also the address there, Alexander Streisky at mass.gov, to send in public comments by email as well.
Are they going to remove sand and gravel as part of this plan as well? Is that the?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just afraid we're faced here with a dying industry whose legacy is a dead water supply. I have to believe they're subsidizing the cranberry activities now with gravel and with state-approved large-scale solar arrays. So it just seems so short-sighted.
I can speak to that a little bit as well, Howard. I think from an Indigenous perspective, I think we all know that the voices of Indigenous people have been ignored for hundreds of years, particularly for us. I can speak for the Herring Pond community. We know that Earl and, this has been happening for hundreds of years. Earl spoke when our lands were divided and in the 1850 division of the Herring Pond Indian lands, that the land that we were allowed to retain was cut and stripped and nearly, he called it useless and unproductive of income. So what we're doing now is just not standing back. We're taking a stand. It's at a good time. Everybody's talking about equity and inclusion, and we're really seizing that opportunity and reaching out to the EPA. We're in conversations with DEP, and they're listening. So I hope that some of these clean green facades that happen in a lot of these permits that are being issued, they're going to start taking a second look. So Howard, I know we've spoke on several occasions,
Yeah.
and I thank you for that question, because it's important to, not just Indigenous people, it's important to, all of our residents and everyone who lives on this land in Massachusetts and abroad. So thank you for that.
I think, I often think, along with the tremendous loss of human Native Americans over the centuries, the greatest loss right along with it is this lack of reverence for the earth. How we regain that, I don't know, but every effort that we can make is a step in the right direction. I've often used the term, the fish rots from the head, and we are a busy group putting out forest fires, but the real problem lies with those people who are permitting these activities under the guise of some other pretense. I'm sorry, but I refer to solar energy, at least the way it's being done, is solar foolishness. And I've watched the cranberry industry as a former selectman and responsible for gravel permits and the rest of it. It was, for years, it's been the yellow gold to red gold. And now the red gold has kind of dried up from $85 a barrel to $25 a barrel. So now we're back into the yellow gold business with gravel. So I would hate to think that I see the industry is probably having destroyed more wetlands in southeastern Mass than any other place on earth. And I remember when they decided to stop that, and new bogs had to be created in uplands, but now we're beginning to see what devastating effect that's had, because it was essentially our beautiful Pine Barrens that went asunder. So it's not a very rich history, and headed for an even worse legacy.
Gina asked if we were going to send this out, and we will. We'll send out an email with the slides and the recording, and so you'll get the information on some of these take action items, which also includes a letter campaign to the Wareham Board of Selectmen, which will be in there. can someone answer this? Is there some sort of draft document that the DEP is putting forward for comments? That's the topic of the April 28th meeting. Do any of you all know that?
No.
I know there is some MIPA, there's something coming up that there's comments due for MIPA, but I do believe we'd have to maybe submit that and send it out, or have Meg put it on the community land and water site for you all. I know she keeps good records, so she knows when the comments are due. So that would be my suggestion, is to, we could check with Julian.
The comments are due on May 10th, but I think the question is more if there's a draft document to comment on. So we'll have to dig that up.
Yeah, they do have one through the network that it's a template that they're asking people to just either submit their own letter, or you can use that template through the network, the Access network. So I think Meg we could get that link out to everyone surely.
We have the letter writing link in our thing. I think this is I think that the question is about a actual document that the Mass government has that we can respond to. So it sounds like we need to try and track that answer down for you.
Excellent.
And when was the selectmen's meeting to consider the chapter land optioning? Is that coming up next week? In the way that,
Kathy Pappalardo and Nancy McHale, that
Right.
meeting with the selectmen is this coming Tuesday.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else with questions?
I have one more observation. Anyway, I heard that that these problems are not only not unique to Plymouth County, that there are other parts in the state, and I'm wondering if there's some coalition that could be formed statewide in terms of protecting water. Gravel seems to be the common element here, that the driving force, and I would think statewide, and maybe this a joined voice with the legislature might get us some action. Because again, if we can stick our finger in the dike all we want, but if it's allowed at the state level, then we're up against the enemy is us.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
There is a statewide group, the State Watershed Alliance,
Mm-hmm.
that in the past has been involved with trying to get sustainable water legislation. Basically, as a response to the way the state handles drought, but also to try to get towns to crack down on the way water is used in the towns. We know in the watershed that I live on, studies done during the summertime show that a lot of the towns use anywhere from 200 to 400% more water during the summertime than they do in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what they're using the water on. It's it's on grass,
Along with the chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big problem, because it's just as David showed in his slides. These wells are sucking our streams dry, and of course, if you live on the North Shore, you know about the Ipswich River, and then in my watershed, we've got streams that get pulled down to the point where parts of them are dry too. So, we do need a bigger presence statewide to try to to try to get the legislation that will protect the watersheds. And in the case of, you know, the Plymouth Carver Aquifer, obviously strip mining is, you know, amongst the worst things that you can do for that aquifer. You know?
Yeah. And a question for David. I don't mean to occupy the evening here, but when we look at the sheet flow of water, where does that take place? If we're digging down to within 2 feet or 2 yards of the water table, and then putting in infrastructure, aren't we altering the sheet flow of the aquifer?
Yeah, you mean like the infiltration?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in some case, yeah, you are. I mean, you're changing not only perhaps the direction that water would flow, but also the time that water spends in the ground. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things we're working on a proposal together with a group. I think Gia knows the name of the Southern Pine Barrens Alliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
To look at impacts of sea level rise on water levels in the Plymouth Carver Aquifer and saline intrusion. And essentially over time, the amount of fresh water that's moving through the aquifer is actually going to be decreasing. And, you know, along with that stressor from sand and gravel extraction, you have other, you have other factors at play. And the time, what we call the residence time, how long water resides in the subsurface, plays a really important role on water quality, you know, on reduction of viruses and other, you know, other things that get into the subsurface. So, you know, you know, people call the aquifer your natural filter, and as you get rid of that, you know, that buffer, you're eventually going to have issues, you know, issues with water quality too. So, yeah.
I mean, clearly the paving over. I'm in Plimpton, and we're right at a watershed divide between Taunton and the Plymouth Carver, and we pretty much paved over most of our share, a lot of it with Cisco, in that part of town. So
and work that we've done in our group here has shown that what happens a lot of times is that water, you take that water and you put them into infiltration basins and ponds, and you put it into the ground really quickly, and you're altering that, you know, those natural processes that allow the water to sort of take time moving through the soil and organic horizons. So yeah, that's definitely a cause of concern. You know, the EPA, I'm on the technical steering committee for a big project that's happening in Taunton to try to look at different ways in which you may design those types of systems in a better way. But there's a long, you know, there's a lot to try to figure out, because I think what we've been doing, you know, from replacing distributed infiltration capacity with more localized fixes and band-aids is not working.
Yeah, I collect antique cars, and actually Stanley steamers that rely heavily on a water supply. We get about a mile to a gallon of water, but we often tour in the Midwest, and, you know, the Oklahoma, Kansas, that I can't pronounce the name of that aquifer, but I know that just the farming activities to take bad lands and convert them into productive lands has lowered that, 180 feet or something, they say.
Yeah, that's well,
or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
it's the Ogallala Aquifer.
Although It's the Ogallala Formation. We call it the High Plains Aquifer now in
yeah.
hydrogeology.
Yeah.
Brittany, did you have a question?
I had actually, my reaction is still on.
Mhm.
I had a knee-jerk reaction when the topic of having some kind of statewide coalition came up, because it sounds like there are some organizations that are what people are asking about. And from my perspective, I do a lot of work with Native mascots, and that's a whole other topic. But my point is that sometimes the work just covers educating the state representatives that it's not a local issue. It's larger than meeting with a specific school board in one town and then meeting with another school board in another town. And then to be a Native representative who's involved with that, it can be very time consuming. And the workload feels like it's really consistently coming in. So to look at that particular topic from a higher viewpoint, if you will, from like the bird's eye view, and to look it down and see how it's all interconnected, as far as what I'm doing, has proven to be incredibly valuable, not just for time, but for energy and efforts and effectiveness. And I think we've made a lot of progress being able to organize and communicate. Those two things are really, I think we all know those things are really key to make this kind of thing move at a statewide level so we can make a larger positive change. So looking at this, not that the topics are exactly the same thing, but obviously, you have a meeting here in this town about this specific issue that could be with, about gravel, or it could be about solar, and it could be about all these things. But if you look at the root, if you look from the viewpoint above, it's all interconnected, just like how we all are, just like how we're talking about all the waterways and how the water can go in many different directions. And I think that I just had that knee-jerk reaction of saying that is incredibly valuable and powerful thing if you can do it in the right way and you can bring the right voices to the table as well. In an event like this, we have all different kinds of voices, and Indigenous voices, which are so important. And I just really, really thought it would be important to underscore that might be a really effective way to move forward. And that way you're not spinning your wheels all the time trying to look at all the different towns with all their different issues all of the time. So I just really thought that was powerful and important.
Yeah, it's particularly true with, what is there, 6 or 7 towns that are served by the Plymouth Carver Aquifer. And Bob Duran, years ago, one of the nicest things he did, in my opinion, was he put up these signs where rivers crossed town boundaries, and it was communities connected by water. And I just thought, we all, being a public official, things get pretty parochial, and I noticed in New England what we did best was put our dumps on the other town's town line. But we are connected by these resources, and there's power in numbers. So I think even locally we ought to be looking at the towns served by Plymouth Carver and trying to get at least representation in our coalition from each of those communities. I think you're quite right, Brittany, that unless we can get our legislators to the table, no, we can't get the eagle view of, or give them the eagle's view of what's going on statewide or regionally. Yeah.
Okay, we are over time. I do see that Nancy and Kathy posted in the chat box that the Wareham Board of Selectmen meeting is Tuesday at 7 o'clock on Zoom. And they posted the meeting ID. Again, if you want to copy that out of the chat box, all the information's there, and we will also send it out with our notes. They are voting whether to exercise their right of first refusal regarding Chapter 61A of the 3 parcels of forest scheduled to be clear cut for solar. So important meeting for us all to get to virtually.
Yes.
Anyone have last closing remarks? I'd like to just really thank the presenters tonight. It was a great group of voices. And thank you all for joining us. And we will send out the recording to all of you that are on, and feel free to share it.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
too.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you. Good job, everybody.
Nice meeting you, Casey. Never met. Thanks. Nice.